The news story is a strong 6.2 magnitude earthquake hit eastern Japan today, the U.S. Geological Survey said, but there were no immediate reports of damage. The quake at a depth of 44 kilometers struck shortly after 6:42 a.m. local time near the northeast coast of the main Honshu Island, some 350 kilometers from Tokyo. No tsunami warning has been issued.
Well, New Zealand is cleaning up after a 7.8 magnitude earthquake struck shortly after midnight near Christchurch early Monday morning. 2 deaths have been reported and a tsunami has been reported since. Here's a look where the powerful earthquake struck. Now, this is just 35 miles northeast of Āngeles. Christchurch is one of the biggest cities in New Zealand. They saw a devastating earthquake not that long ago, 2011. Now, shortly thereafter, there was a tsunami. That's the tsunami you're looking at. It was on the east coast and it measured 8 to 12 feet above normal tide. This was in Kaikoura. It did kill 2 people. 1 person is still reported missing in the Kaikoura area. So far, there have been more than 20 aftershocks measuring 4.8 magnitude or greater.
The important figure here to note is the depth of the quake, because that will indicate how severe the damage or the casualties might be. And the experts here are saying that the shallowness of the quake was about 15 kilometers. So we're still assessing at the moment the scale of the damage. As I say, it's the middle of the night. The area that was actually the epicenter of the quake, about 20 kilometers east of a town called Hanmer Springs. That's not a well-built-up area. It's actually a remote rural country. The initial report said that power lines were knocked down, the phone system failed. People even talked about the emergency 111 number actually out of action. So it's very difficult for the authorities to get an assessment, a quick assessment of the damage and the casualties, but already tonight we have photographs appearing on the web showing damage in some of the areas close to the epicenter, not right at Cheviot, which is one of the towns affected, but we are getting reports that there's severe damage, but I think we're going to have to wait until daylight in New Zealand to really get a clear, full picture of what actually has happened.
And for the 4th straight night, protests are happening across the country in cities big and small. Some protesters turning violent, attacking police. It's a sign of just how divided our country remains, as you saw earlier in our poll numbers. And ABC's Jim Avila has more on the election fallout. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning, Paula. This morning, more evidence that not everyone is ready to accept the results of election 2016. Thousands of Hispanics, gays, and others take to the streets to protest Donald Trump's election. And on the internet, it's some Trump supporters lashing out. Overnight, a 4th night of violent protest in Portland, Oregon. Thousands of demonstrators clashing with police, spraying tear gas to clear the streets. The chaotic scene unfolding as demonstrations were carried out from coast to coast in front of the president-elect's Manhattan Tower. To Los Angeles, where an estimated 10,000 people marched through the streets.
This is a very multicultural, diverse country. We can't have somebody who stands against that as the head of the government.
And parts in between, like Indianapolis, home state of the vice president-elect, where a protest of 500 in front of the state capitol began peacefully, but ended with some hauled away in handcuffs.
When there is violence, we have to take action. That is our responsibility as a police department.
Stop Trump now!
Hundreds arrested this weekend nationwide as anti-Trump protesters react to Trump's election and the racism that has accompanied it. The Southern Poverty Law Center saying there have been more than 200 reports of hate-based intimidation and harassment since Election Day on college campuses in Michigan, Massachusetts, New York, and that's not all. At the University of Oklahoma and the University of Pennsylvania, an investigation into a violent racist group chat aimed at African-American students. The FBI brought in to investigate. Penn student Nadia Browning was one of the targets.
I wasn't surprised by the hate that was coming my way, but it really hurt because in my lifetime, I've never experienced anything like this before.
Some Trump supporters on campus embarrassed by what's going on.
We all come together, regardless of who we voted for, and we make it clear that these things aren't acceptable.
Now, here in Los Angeles, most of the protesters on the street have been peaceful, at least yesterday. But across the country, that has not always been the case. Dan and Paula?
No, it has not. Jim, thank you. As promised, we have ABC News chief anchor George Stephanopoulos right here with us. George is going to be hosting This Week later this morning. So many things to talk about here. But let's start with this choice of chief of staff. What is this going to tell us about how Trump intends to govern?
You know, Trump had so many different kinds of promises, some that were in keeping with the Republican establishment, some that were taking on the Republican establishment. It's being played out in this choice of chief of staff, if indeed the choice is between Reince Priebus, the RNC chair, a close ally of the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, or Steve Bannon, the head of Breitbart, who was taking on Paul Ryan every single day as the head of Breitbart. So I think what Trump may try to do is find a way to thread the needle and give them both serious positions inside the White House. But that chief of staff is the most critical role in the White House, no question about it.
A lot of eyebrows being raised as Trump continues his transition. An interesting name that's being floated out there right now for key advisor is President Obama. He's even said that he would consider Bill Clinton's counsel. Are you buying that?
Well, I think he'll call on former presidents. I think there's no question about that. Whether he'll be taking a lot of policy counsel from President Obama, I think that's a little bit tougher to swallow, given the fact that so much of what Donald Trump has said he would do is undo many of President Obama's executive orders in the first day. But we did see a clue. Donald Trump, talking about health care this week, said President Obama advised him to keep the idea that if you have a pre-existing condition, you can buy health insurance, and kids can stay on their parents' insurance plan up until the age of 26. Whether that's possible or not, if you're dismantling Obamacare, is a separate question. But he certainly sort of deferred in that direction.
Queer suicide prevention hotlines, the Trevor Project, and Trans Lifeline have reported a significant increase in calls after Donald Trump won the presidency just a few short days ago. We started getting increased call volume at about 10 p.m. on election night, and it hasn't slowed down at all. Trans Lifeline's Greta Martella told Mother Jones for them to have the House, the Senate, and the presidency is pretty frightening for LGBT people, she told The Verge.
The right wing were on the march in strength in the Polish capital, marking their country's Day of Independence, but also celebrating the retreat of the liberal elite. Opposition groups were screened from view and protected by a cordon of nationalist paramilitaries. Thousands of riot police were mobilized but kept to the back streets and out of sight.
The rise of the extreme right here and the sense of nationalism is being very much tolerated by the ruling government here, who are in the middle of what they describe as a right-wing revolution. The sentiments here on the streets of Warsaw are very much against immigration.
They are Muslims with completely different habits, different political culture, which has nothing to do with our Polish culture.
The U.S. has agreed to resettle refugees being held in Australia's controversial island detention camps. The number of refugees being resettled was not announced, but reports say the deal would be offered first to those who are most vulnerable, particularly families. Australia has a strict policy that bars migrants who come illegally by boat from settling in the country. Those that do are automatically placed in detention camps located on several different islands. Australia has faced a lot of criticism for housing refugees on the islands. Human rights groups have accused the government of ignoring alleged inhumane treatment of the people forced to live there. Some have suggested people smugglers will use the deal as a ploy to bring more asylum seekers to Australia, but the government warns those seeking refuge by boat will be turned away. Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull didn't say whether the deal had been discussed with U.S. President-elect Donald Trump, only that it was made with the current administration. Officials hope to begin resettling refugees early next year.
For a long time, many far-right nationalist groups languished on the sidelines of mainstream European politics. But for the last couple of years, they've been gathering support and winning elections. The Alternative for Germany party began 3 years ago as a protest movement against the euro currency. Now, it wants tough controls on immigration and a halt to the building of mosques. It won nearly 25% of the vote in some German states during elections in March. Marine Le Pen is the leader of France's National Front party. It's against immigration and the European Union. It didn't win any of France's 13 regional elections last year. But left-wing President François Hollande is plunging in the polls. And there's a growing belief the National Front's chances in the 2017 presidential election are getting better. This is Geert Wilders. He's one of Europe's most prominent far-right politicians. He's leader of the Party for Freedom in the Netherlands. It's against the European Union. It also wants to close all Islamic schools and record the ethnicity of all Dutch citizens. The party holds 12 seats in the Netherlands' lower house of parliament. In 2012, the Golden Dawn Party won 18 seats in the Greek parliament. It started as a protest vote. Greece was suffering a crushing debt and punishing austerity measures. The party holds extreme anti-immigrant views. It wants a defense agreement with Russia, and it blames the euro currency for destroying the Greek economy. Its members have been called neo-Nazis by critics. Recently, its supporters have been holding demonstrations near refugee camps. Other far-right groups in Europe include Jobbik in Hungary, the Sweden Democrats, Austria's Freedom Party and Slovakia's People's Party. They all say they're gaining a grip on mainstream politics because Europeans are scared about the influx of hundreds of thousands of refugees and because Europe's economy is struggling. And many far-right parties say their chances of election success have been boosted because the EU has been weakened by the UK vote to leave it and because Donald Trump is going to be President of the United States.
Turkey warned its citizens of the dangers of traveling to the United States on Saturday in response to increasingly violent protests against President-elect Donald Trump. Demonstrators will gather again on Saturday in U.S. cities nationwide to protest against Trump, whose election they believe poses a severe threat to civil and human liberties.
While the whole world awaits what President-elect Donald Trump could do once in office, many U.S. citizens are determined to cross the border and start life afresh in Canada. Canadian Minister of Foreign Affairs Stéphane Dion said his country will welcome U.S. nationals in.
Always pleased to have their visit. If you say that we will have a lot of Americans willing to live in Canada, it's speculation. I would not go there. Just want to say, as I said just before, that will be reconstructive, both in our relationship bilaterally with the United States and with also the role the United States need to play in the world.
Although a landslide victory for himself and Republicans, Trump is still facing resistance in America. There are ongoing protests in major cities across the United States. For Canada, the choice seems to be staying optimistic about what Trump's administration could bring to the world.
We are very optimistic that whatever will happen, always the relationship between the two countries will be strong. And we welcome the choice of the American people. There is a new president coming next January. We'll work very positively.
For Africa, the coming of Donald J. Trump to the White House has already sent a mixed message. Some hope he'll stick to the already existing economic and political partnership deals. But for some, it's the total opposite. But be it as it may, only time will tell as to what the U.S. under Trump could follow as a policy towards Africa.
We reject the president-elect! We reject the president-elect! We reject the president-elect! We reject the president-elect! Love Trump's hate! Love Trump's hate! Love Trump's hate!
This peaceful protest came about last night when kind of the initial shock wore off. And we're seeing protests all over the world. And it's very difficult to be an American abroad, especially when your country is going through such a difficult time.
My biggest fear is that he's going to try to take away all the progressive policies and initiatives that we have seen being put in place over the past 8 years, same-sex marriage, Roe versus Wade, and that's something very scary for me.
Love Trump's hate! Love Trump's hate! Love Trump's hate!
As an American living abroad, it is still important for me to show my solidarity with people who are living in fear currently in the United States. Just because the distance is there, it doesn't make me any less of an American. It doesn't take my right away from expressing what I feel. And I think it's also a wake-up call for Israelis that, you know, Trump has said anti-Semitic things, and he's not this beacon of hope and light that some people think he is.
Representatives from almost 200 nations are meeting for a fifth day in Morocco. Now, they're discussing the implementation of the Paris Climate Change Accords. Disappearing glaciers are a major concern in Uganda. Scientists fear some may be completely gone within 15 years. Malcolm Webb has more now from the Rwenzori Mountains.
It's from this high mountain pass that there is the first view of the Rwenzori glaciers, the white patches on top of the peaks. 5,000 meters above sea level over there. Whatever the outcome is in Marrakesh, scientists expect these glaciers to be gone within 10 or 20 years anyway. Even a significant reduction in carbon dioxide emissions across the whole world. At this point, I think it would still be too late to save those glaciers from what we understand. Within living memory, those white areas covered much more of the mountain, and our guides tell us even where we're standing, just a few years ago, it used to snow regularly, and the snow would last for days before melting.
Well, first of all, I want to say that Donald Trump is going to be a great president. This is my opinion. And I say, let your heart not be troubled, fellas. Give this guy a chance. Many good things are going to happen very quickly. One is the engine of our economy is going to be stimulated very, very quickly. And he'll make decisions that are going to be very important to us. He'll keep us safe, and he'll get us back in the game economically. So those are two things immediately that will be happening. In a season like this, everybody says everything. They try to demonize the other character. We listen to that propaganda and we make our decisions in that way. Well, we can make the wrong decision. But I know the people, and I've done the research, and I know what the situation is with all of the issues, and he's answered them very clearly and in depth. So there we go.